Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. Both teams, please send your next competing members up to the stage. From Shrek Academy, we have Bei Bei. From the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy, we have Michael. Both members, please ascend the stage. Shrek Academy held the advantage now that the individual round had reached this stage. They'd even laid a solid foundation for the upcoming 2-2-3 fight. Shrek Academy had only sent out a soul ancestor, Shusansha, yet he'd been able to overcome 2 Class 5 soul engineers. His contributions were immense. Furthermore, one of his opponent had died, while the other had been gravely injured. They couldn't compete in the 2-2-3 fight. This meant that Shrek Academy had already won 1 round out of the 3 rounds in the 2-2-3 fight. And they just had to win 2 rounds out of 3 in the 2-2-3 fight. Even though Shrek Academy had lost Shusansha, their 2 Soul Emperors had yet to compete. Their advantage in the individual round was obvious. Team Sun Moon's teacher squinted his eyes, and his expression turned ghastly. However, he also knew that he couldn't panic at this point. If they made a false move, they could lose the entire tournament. It wasn't as if Shrek's advantage would last forever, even though they had the upper hand right now. After all, the individual round had only just begun. He summoned Meng Hongchen over. Little Meng, everything will depend on you later. You'll be up next. For the Academy's glory, give it your all. The teacher said in a deep voice. A weird radiance flashed across Meng Hongchen's eyes as she nodded her head slightly. Don't worry, teacher. I might not be able to determine the outcome, but I can definitely change the situation. I won't let Shrek Academy have it easy. Yes, we're counting on you. The teacher bowed slightly towards Meng Hongchen. Xiao Hongchen pursed his lips from the other side. He was dejected, as he believed that he should be the one to turn the tables around. While his sister's capabilities were special, and could lead to unprecedented effects, she was likely to be greatly restricted under certain conditions. Her abilities weren't as balanced as his. However, he really was seriously injured. Even though he might be able to participate in the 2-2-3 fight, he would be useless in the individual round. Besides feeling dejected, there was nothing he could do. Bei Bei and Michael retreated to the edges of the competition stage. The Heaven Fiend Doluor didn't reveal any expression on his face as gestured and shouted, "Match, start." Michael was an official team member, thus his powers were superior to the other 2 members before him. His abilities weren't as simple as they'd seemed when he'd faced Jiang Peng from the Imperial Profound Academy. He immediately displayed his true capabilities the moment the competition began. A series of metallic clanking sounds rang out as several soul tools attached themselves to his body. However, he was different from his other team members. There weren't many barrels on his body, but they were all located around his legs and back. A pair of blue, metal boots had appeared around his feet and legs. At the same time, 2 metal barrels had appeared behind his back. These 2 metal barrels were only 3 inches long, but they were more than 6 inches in diameter. The backs of these barrels were shaped like balls, which allowed them to change directions easily. Hu Yuhao would find it difficult to control such an advanced soul tool, as his soul power was insufficient, but Michael could easily control this soul tool, as he was a Class 5 soul engineer. Other than these 2 soul tools, 4 metal wings extended from Michael's ribs. But they were not flying-type soul tools. Rather, they were there to help him adjust his aim and maintain his balance. In addition, there was a thick barrel on each of his arms, as well as another huge, circular, ball-like object that seemed similar to a concentrated soul tool on his chest. Bei Bei fought in a similar style to most soul masters. As soon as the start of the competition was announced, he burst forward towards his opponent as fast as possible. Closing the gap between them was the best way that one could resist a long-distance soul engineer. Michael also made his move, the long boots on his leg flashing with light, causing him to immediately move a few meters laterally at a frightening speed. While he wasn't comparable to Chenin, he was not that much slower either. The soul thruster behind his back also shot out a little light as he moved laterally, although their radiance wasn't intense. However, it still managed to increase his speed significantly, while the wings on his back automatically adjusted to maintain his balance as he moved. Hu Yuhao and He Kai too were both awed when they saw these soul tools in action. Michael truly lived up to his name as a disciple that came from the best soul engineering academy on the continent. Michael's immaculate control of these soul tools had left them extremely amazed. He couldn't just dodge throughout the entire fight though. He lifted his hand while he was moving, and the barrel on his right hand fired towards Bei Bei. An scarlet, oval-shaped ball of light quickly shot out into the air and flew without any rhythm. Despite its erraticness, Bei Bei remained its target. What was strange was that it didn't let out any sound as it appeared. Bei Bei's expression became serious and he stopped in his tracks. He waved his right hand and unleashed his blue lightning tyrant dragon, his first soul ring shining brightly. He then used his thunderous dragon claw to grab the ball of light. It was imperative for Bei Bei to understand what the offensive capabilities of his opponent were, based off of the 2 soul cannons on his opponent's arms. He managed to precisely grab the orange-red light ball, but a strange scene appeared. The lightning from the thunderous dragon claw was extinguished as soon as it made contact with the orange-red light ball. The ball of light stopped in mid-air, then began to shine even more brightly than before. Hikaitu had already stood up below the stage. He said in horror, "That's an automatic soul cannon. To think they actually had something like this." Wu Yuhao had once heard Fan Yu's description of such a soul tool. It was a powerful soul tool that Shrek Academy didn't possess. Once an automatic soul cannon was fired, the cannon shell would absorb all surrounding energy, then become explosive once it struck its opponent, or was blocked. The scariest thing was that it could also be detonated at any time. This meant that Michael could make it so that the cannon shell only detonated a few seconds after it was touched. Generally speaking, it would explode between 1 and 5 seconds after contact. After all, a cannon shell was a high-energy entity compressed from soul power. It couldn't be controlled for too long. But many things could still be decided within this period of time. This was the case now. When he saw the sudden increase in the intensity of the light, Bei Bei had no choice but to stop and leap to the side. The scarlet ball of light exploded after a second, its frighteningly explosive force creating a burning, scarlet circle of light, with a diameter of more than 1.5 meters, and an even greater explosive strength, to appear. The light caused the air within a 3-meter radius to distort wherever it passed. Bei Bei turned pale and wanted to curse. This soul tool was too powerful. He was likely to be critically injured if he was struck head-on even once. Fortunately, the automatic soul cannon fired at a rather slow speed due to its great power, as a huge amount of soul power had to be gathered before the cannon could be fired. By the time the first cannon shell exploded, Michael's second cannon shell had only just been fired from the barrel on his other hand. This type of soul tool was very useful, but the heat that it generated could easily cause the barrel to crack, and couldn't be fired repeatedly. As such, Michael chose to fire with the other barrel. Ma Rulong had mentioned before that close combat wasn't his forte. These automatic soul cannons that had appeared in this tournament for the first time were his true trump cards. Of course, there was also the scarlet ball that started to light up in front of his chest. It was bound to be something powerful too. Michael's body moved rapidly, as he attacked in a constant attempt to maintain the furthest distance he could from Bei Bei. This second cannon shell crossed in front of the path that Bei Bei would have to follow if he wanted to get to him. A cold radiance flashed in Bei Bei's eyes. This time he actively moved to collide with the cannon shell, rather than use a soul skill to intercept it. A cold smile was revealed on Michael's face. He thought to himself, "Are you trying to dodge my attack? My cannon shell has locked onto you, you can't escape it. Once you're hit by it, you'll be stuck, and I'll be able to exact revenge for my brothers." When the cannon shell reached in front of Bei Bei, he lifted his left hand and grabbed it. Why did he grab hold of the cannon shell? This was what every spectator wondered. In the Sun Moon team's eyes, his arm was bound to be crippled, even if he didn't die. Bei Bei's movements were sequential. The moment he grabbed the cannon shell, his footsteps became slightly faster. As he slid towards the cannon shell, his body became slightly illusory. He let go of the cannon shell, but the cannon shell came sticking back towards him as it tracked him. But Bei Bei also wrenched his left hand downwards at this point. The cannon shell, which was less than a foot away, seemed to be guided by his palm, and was slammed into the ground. It was completely smashed by the impact. Bei Bei then burst forward with increased speed, as he propelled himself off the ground with the tips of his toes, increasing the gap between the cannon shell and him to over 3 meters. A boom resonated from behind him. It was as if the sun was shining brightly at his back. "I have to return your favor. Since you've given me 2 eggs, I'll give one to you in return." Bei Bei's right wrist jerked as he flung a pitch-black, ball-like entity towards Michael. This ball-like entity was oval-shaped, and its trajectory was as unrhythmic as the automatic soul cannon shell. It drew an arc in the air as it flew towards Michael. Michael had just fired his third cannon at this point, and was shocked by how his second cannon shell was smashed onto the ground by Bei Bei. However, he immediately adjusted his third cannon, so that its cannon shell would blow apart instantaneously. If Bei Bei dared to use the same method again, the cannon shell would explode the instant he made contact with it. However, it was a pity that he couldn't absorb any further energy from Bei Bei's soul skills, as it was unlikely that Bei Bei would use them again. The two ball-like objects seemed to interlace as the scarlet ball of light reached Bei Bei almost instantly. Bei Bei performed an unexpected limber-like action as he burst forward. He continued to advance, but his upper body was bent backwards. He flung both of his hands backwards too, causing the scarlet ball of light to be pushed backwards by a special force. Despite this, it remained locked onto Bei Bei, and continued chasing him after flying 3 meters away. A loaded arrow concealed in Bei Bei's sleeve suddenly flew out and struck the ball of light at this moment. Once Michael's automatic soul cannon shell was struck, it would blow up. In other words, it wouldn't continue to chase its target anymore. It wasn't so intelligent after all. A deafening explosion that generated immense heat reverberated from behind Bei Bei, but Bei Bei wasn't struck by the shockwave as he continued to advance forwards. Well done. Even Elder Xian couldn't help but say when he saw this scene. He was immensely amazed. Bei Bei had dealt with his opponent's soul tools extremely brilliantly. Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong looked at each other and saw the amazement in each other's eyes. Bei Bei hadn't resisted the automatic soul cannon with his blue lightning tyrant dragon, but with a secret weapon from the Tang sect. As the Tang sect's eldest disciple, he'd finally revealed the true ability that he'd concealed for so long in the tournament. He'd used the Tang sect's secret techniques. While Bei Bei handled the third automatic soul cannon, the metal ball that he'd thrown reached Michael. Michael wasn't careless, but he was still extremely scornful subconsciously. As an outstanding student from the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy, he was acquainted with the history of soul tools. Thrown soul tools had existed for a long time, but he couldn't think of any powerful ones amongst those this size. It wasn't just arrogance for Bei Bei to fling a thrown soul tool towards a Class 5 soul engineer like him, it was much worse than arrogance. However, he didn't react to it carelessly despite having such an opinion. He lifted his right hand and the thunderous soul sword that he'd once used against Jiang Peng appeared. A bolt of lightning shot out and turned into a lightning whip that he swung towards the metal ball. Lightning was naturally attracted to metal. He wouldn't let the metal ball get close to him. A simple explosion wouldn't affect him with the distance he maintained from the metal ball. Furthermore, he was rapidly retreating backwards as he wielded the sword, while also preparing to fire his fourth cannon. Bei Bei might be very agile at dodging, but Michael wasn't scared of Bei Bei getting close to him. In addition to this, he could tell that Bei Bei had exhausted all of his power dodging his previous 3 cannon shells. He fired this fourth cannon towards the ground in front of Bei Bei. Delaying his opponent was imperative. A sequence of strategies formed in Michael's mind. The only thing that didn't cross his mind was the potential problem that the metal ball could pose to him. Boom, the metal ball blew apart the moment it was struck by the lightning. Compared to Michael's cannon shells, this explosion seemed very mild. It was as if a watermelon had been smashed. It didn't even catch many people's attention. However, a gust of fog rose the moment it exploded. This fog carried a sweet scent that diffused in the air. As lightning flashed through it, the gust of fog surged slightly. Poison. This was Michael's first thought. He was called an elite talent from the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy for a reason, as a barrier immediately shone around his body. As he was a Class 5 soul engineer, this barrier was naturally a Class 5 barrier as well. Although this barrier couldn't withstand Ma Xiaotao's attacks, or Shu Sanxi's descent of Xuanwu, it was still resistant against most Soul King level attacks. He believed that his defense was already very stable. While Bei Bei was quite intelligent to use poisonous gas, he was only delaying Michael's attack by a bit. Poisonous gas wasn't of much use against him. But was it really just poisonous gas? A soft crackling sound rang out. There was insufficient sunlight bearing down amidst the gloomy weather, thus Michael only briefly saw a black figure flash through the air. The crackling sound had originated from the barrier on his body. Afterwards, he felt his body turning numb. It was as if he had been stabbed, and his body became stiff. The most tragic thing was that the cannon shell he'd just fired had stopped in front of him. How could this have happened? Was it a dud? Two thoughts popped up in Michael's mind at the same time. He hadn't expected to face something like this. Furthermore, he didn't know what trick Bei had employed. However, a beam of light descended from the sky and engulfed his body at this point. This beam of light shielded him when the cannon shell blew up. Everything had turned scarlet in front of Michael, and his gaze stiffened. His hair stood on end, and cold sweat ran down his back. If the beam of light had come even a second later, he wouldn't have been able to react in time. If he'd been engulfed entirely by that scarlet radiance, he would have followed in the footsteps of his compatriots. There truly was a thin line between life and death. The heaven fiend Doluor had been the one to save him. The things that had happened before had left this title Doluor on his toes. He'd already readied his only defense-type skill in his palm. Once he realized that something was amiss, he'd immediately protected Michael. Bei seemed regretful as he muttered, "It seems like I'm better. He used so many eggs, but they were all inferior to mine." As the scarlet radiance slowly faded away, the muffled sound thunder could be heard from the sky. The weather became even more gloomy. But this gloominess couldn't compare to the Sun-Moon team's mood. Since the heaven fiend Doluor had intervened, it meant that Michael had lost. What they couldn't comprehend was how Michael had lost. What was that metal ball that Bei had thrown? Even most of those from Shrek Academy were confused. Secret weapon, it was definitely a secret weapon from the Tang sect. Hui Yuhao clenched his fist, and watched the lofty Bei in awe. The Tang sect secret technique had finally appeared after many years of disappearance. However, how many still knew about the Tang sect secret techniques now? It was a powerful secret weapon from the Tang sect known as the clustered soul-chasing balls. The black figure that had appeared was the metal ball. After the clustered soul-chasing balls blew apart, countless oxhair needles had flown out. While these needles were poisonous, the poisonous fog had appeared in order to mask their presence. The clustered soul-chasing balls were among the top 10 secret weapons in the Tang sect, and specialized in breaking down all sorts of defensive barriers. Even a Class 5 defense barrier could only slow these needles down. In the end, the barrier was eventually penetrated by the needles, and the automatic soul cannon shell was detonated. Bei hadn't intended to do the last part, however, that was just a coincidence. Michael collapsed, just like that at the center of the stage. The heaven fiend Doluor's facial muscles twitched, and he burst towards Michael to prop him up. He quickly examined Michael's body, poison. The heaven fiend Doluor was shocked and turned to look at Bei. Bei shrugged and said, "Don't worry, it's not lethal. I'll give him the antidote once today's competition ends. It's not like I can give it to him now, right?" The 2-2-3 fight had yet to begin. Giving his opponent the antidote now would mean that he'd have another opponent to deal with in the 2-2-3 fight. What else could Huang Jinshu say? He could only personally escort Michael down from the stage. Shrek Academy had won yet again. Up until now, only 1 out of the 7 Shrek Academy members had been eliminated, whereas the Sun Moon team had already lost a total of 3 members. The conclusion seemed foregone in this individual round. The healing-type Soul Masters were also helpless against the poison, they were only able to treat injuries. Furthermore, it wasn't easy to remove poison from the Tang sect. As the team leader of the preparatory squad, Bei's move was very intelligent. Now that one of them had been poisoned, the Sun Moon team would be more cautious in the later stages. If they went all out, who would be able to provide them with the antidote after the competition ended? Meng Hongchen sauntered onto the competition stage. Her looks couldn't compare to Jiang Nanan's, but she was still a charming and good-looking young girl, and was about Jiang Nanan's age as well. Her flowing locks were a rare wine-red color. It was a deeper hue than Ma Xiaotao's, and resembled mellow wine flecked with pale hues. However, her eyes weren't red, but were blue. This characteristic was different from her brother, Xiao Hongchen. She was the 4th contestant from the Sun Moon Empire's team to participate in the single elimination round. The Sun Moon Empire's team only had 4 individuals left who could still participate, including her and her severely injured elder brother. The Sun Moon Empire's team had won the group battle, but everything was still going according to Wang Yang's plan and arrangement. Shrek Academy's team could be said to have obtained an overwhelming victory in terms of battle strategy and tactics. All their patience in terms of battle strategy in the competition before this had been worth it at this moment. Who else did Shrek Academy have to send out in this single elimination round? Other than Bei Bei, Shrek was able to send out the control-type Soul King, Ling Luo Chen. After that, there was still the White Tiger Soul Emperor, Dai Yueheng, as well as the Evil Phoenix Soul Emperor, Ma Xiaodao. As for the Sun Moon, besides Meng Hongchen, they only had a food-type Class 5 Soul Engineer, Xiao Xiafeng, their team leader, Ma Rulong, and the heavily wounded Xiao Hongchen. Soul Engineers should generally have an advantage over Soul Masters of the same level. However, which of the contestants from Shrek Academy wasn't a monster? Why had Michael lost? Because he hadn't expected Bei Bei's battle tactics. According to their research, Bei Bei's greatest strength was his martial soul mutation on the battlefield, a cross between the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon and the Golden Holy Dragon. He'd been on guard against this the whole time, which was why he hadn't used his strongest offensive move. He'd unwittingly lost the battle due to that single clustered soul-chasing ball, without even getting to unleash his full potential. The battlefield could have a myriad of changes in an instant, but every single one of Shrek's team members were pervertedly strong. 2 Soul Ancestors had stepped onto the battlefield and defeated 3 Soul Kings that were also Class 5 Soul Engineers. How powerful would their Soul Kings and Soul Emperors be? How would the Sun Moon Empire's team stand a chance in the single elimination rounds? How would they stand a chance in the following 2-2-3 battle? The final situation was quickly unfurling after this abrupt turn, with the scales of victory slanting in Shrek Academy's favor. This was Shrek, the Monster Academy with over than 10,000 years of history. Meng Hongchen stepped onto the competition stage under such circumstances, and faced her opponent, the Soul Ancestor with the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon, Bei Bei. FreeWebNovel.com begin. The round that the Sun Moon Empire's team couldn't lose began following the Heaven Fiend Doluor's bellow. Bei Bei growled as his feet slid forward, and his entire body rocketed towards his opponent at the fastest speed possible. He'd already completed his original task once he'd achieved victory against Michael. He knew that he couldn't use the same tactic to attain victory a second time. But despite this, and even if he lost, he wanted to whittle down Meng Hongchen's power as much as possible in order to lay down a solid foundation for Ling Luo Chen, who would be the next to come on stage. Wang Yang's current emotions weren't relaxed at all as he stood below the stage, despite their recent victory. His eyes were fixed upon Meng Hongchen, who'd just stepped on stage, but he couldn't explain the sudden ominous feeling that had surfaced in his heart. A profuse number of talents and prodigies had come from Shrek Academy. Shu Sancha and Bei Bei had already sufficiently proven their status as the current outer courtyard's stars, as well as the future inner courtyard's pillars with their background and prowess. But what about their opponents? The Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy wouldn't have become Shrek Academy's nemesis over the past few thousand years if they were that easy to deal with. Xiao Hongchen's abilities were enough to attract Wang Yang's attention. Xiao Hongchen would have probably caused great trouble and danger for the Shrek Academy team, if not for Jiang Nanan's sudden outburst of strength, which had stopped her opponent in his tracks, followed by Dai Yueheng's all-out strike, who wasn't even 15 years of age. Then, what about Meng Hongchen? Xiao Hongchen was the Sun Moon Empire's trump card, and his ability had been to control metal. What was Meng Hongchen's ability? This befuddling question mark had been in Wang Yang's mind this whole time, and still remained unanswered. Meng Hongchen's expression remained as calm as ever as Bei Bei lunged towards her. She wasn't like her comrades, who'd released their soul tools or engaged in long-range combat right from the start. Her feet shifted from beneath her body and she traipsed forward, right towards Bei Bei. At the same time, conspicuous changes began to occur all over her body. Her flowing wine-red hair turned snowy white, while her icy blue eyes instantly turned bright red, the kind of color that made it seem like her eyes were dripping with blood. Whoever witnessed the sudden change in her eyes would definitely be shaken by the sight. Some would even feel terror. Bei Bei had a sensation similar to when he'd faced off against the evil Soul Master, the envoy of the Death God, when he saw her, and an inexplicable chill instantly ran up his spine. It was just at this moment that the sky rang out with the crackling sounds of a lightning strike, and a thin drizzle flitted down from the sky. Meng Hongchen raised both of her hands into the air and suddenly pushed forwards. Every part of her skin that was visible became a snow-white color, and appeared sparkling and translucent. However, her eyes still seemed extremely out of place. They were incredibly breathtaking and electrifying. Her palms seemed to faintly flicker, with a pale green luster as well. Meng Hongchen didn't look like a soul engineer at all. Instead, she appeared much more like a soul master. However, not a single person from Shrek could tell what her martial soul was, not even the Daotai Doluo elder Xian, or Wang Yang. While everyone was flabbergasted by Meng Hongchen's martial soul, both parties were headed straight at each other with dazzling speed. The distance between them was quickly reduced to less than 30 meters. The first one to attack was Meng Hongchen. She raised her hands and drew 2 semicircles outwards, then pushed them in Bei Bei's direction. Her soul rings began to sparkle brilliantly on her body, 2 yellow, 2 purple and 1 black. This was the standard and most optimal soul ring combination. At the same time, a light projection gradually drifted into view behind her. It was a toad, spotlessly white like a piece of jade, and with eyes the same blood-red color as hers. However, the martial soul beast transformation that had appeared on Xiao Hongchen's body didn't appear on Meng Hongchen. This is Wang Yang's eyes instantly widened. He'd perused and scrutinized all sorts of encyclopedias and archives from the academy about martial souls from the moment he'd joined Shrek. He had a strangely familiar feeling about the white jade-like toad before him, and knew that he'd seen this in some ancient record before. A beam of white energy that was a foot long in diameter surged towards Bei Bei from Meng Hongchen's palms when she pushed them out, and her first soul ring lit up along with it. The reason why she'd released a beam of energy, and not radiance, was the fact that this beam didn't seem quick at all. There were tinges of green throughout the whiteness, and the whole thing seemed like a luminous patch of mist. What was even more sinister was that the tiny raindrops, drifting down from the sky naturally infused themselves naturally into the beam of energy, which made it look like a whirlpool. Bei Bei naturally wouldn't underestimate an unknown martial soul. His personality was a lot calmer and more stable than Shu Sanqi's, thus he abruptly halted in his tracks. His third soul ring, the Thunderous Fury, lit up first, followed immediately by his fourth soul ring. He'd actually used his most powerful offensive move, the Thunderous Dragon Head, at the very beginning of the battle. Bei Bei knew just by looking at Meng Hongchen's appearance that it would be extremely difficult for him to emerge victorious. Meng Hongchen seemed to exude an air of mystery in whatever she did. Thus he'd assigned himself a simple target. He would grind his opponent down as much as he could. Right at this moment, Meng Hongchen made a decision that was completely beyond everyone's expectations. She didn't intend to fight fire with fire, and neither did she push forward. Instead, she stood up on her tiptoes, and her body sprung into the sky like a bolt of lightning as she flew backwards with bedazzling speed. The thunderous dragon head barreled forward and blew the white mist energy that she'd unleashed into smithereens, then proceeded to chase after her with the sounds of thunderous howls and dragon-like roars. Part 1 end here.